talks before, one can trace it with certain legitimacy even to the word itself, light. It means two things.
Right.
And I tried to, partly as an experiment and partly because it does echo my personal beliefs. If you take a lot of the conjectures and conclusions that we normally assume when we're talking about light as luminescence, but switch all those conclusions and statements about light over to the other meaning of the word light, which is lightness and weight. I believe personally, people have to do their own experiment with this, but I believe that spiritually, metaphysically, theologically, whatever way you want to look at it, all the rhetoric of light as luminescence make infinitely more sense when you speak of them as lightness. You see, rather than luminescence. I believe there's a huge metaphysical problem here. It's not that light worship is wrong. As I said, that there's a place for the sun. There's a place for that understanding. There's a beautiful aspect of that. And most solar cult, when I'm implicating atomism, I am not, like so many other scholars, implicating in a negative way all solar worship. I'm not.
Yeah.
Because, as I say, the Amanism and various aspects of Brahmanism, they have a much more balanced aspect. The Druids had a much more balanced concept here. They understood that, look, let me put it this way, and I did mention this anecdote in Volume 1. To a Druid, to all ancient people, when the sun rose on the horizon, it looked like an eye.
Okay.
Right? And it looked like the eye of God. That's why we call even a pupil in school a pupil, because the pupil means the center of your eye.
Yeah. Gosh.
Or we call a youngster, young star. Like the Father, he says, "You are my young star, my young son." And son, S-O-N. You're the fruit of my loins. You're the son of me. I'm the God, I'm Amun-Ra, and you're my son, Horus, right? So you have all of these illusions. But when the sun rises on the horizon, it appears to be like a light in the sky, the light. But the Druids were very clever people. And they said, yes, we see the bounty of the light. We see that the sun is a reference to ego because it says, I alone dominate right now. I give you my light, and you see the world around you in great lucidity. But there's also another side to this. I have drawn a veil of light over the night sky, over the body of the goddess. My rising is wonderful and splendid. But as I rose, I also blotted out by my light. I concealed another theater of the mysteries. And then when I set in the west, suddenly my light effulgence is less, and suddenly the theater of the night opens up. And that's when you can study the stars, which were always considered in the body of God. You study those measurements, and then you learn about the geometry. You learn about prediction. You learn about something that God is trying to tell you through the looking of those stars. And then you sit around the fire, and that's where the stories start getting told. And that's where the bardic tradition comes from. People would sit around and play instruments and things. So the night was also considered very sacred, a thing of community, and certainly a thing of personal meditation as well. So the Druids were not just worshippers of light. They understood that, and they had their deities of light. But they also realized that light has a dual function, to not only reveal, but to conceal. Once you move along into the more atomistic, and I'm including Judeo-Christianity here, or Masonry. Look at the symbol. You can't find one symbol of Masonry that doesn't have light beams coming out of it every place. Even the crown that they use, or the capital letter G, you always see the light coming out of these images. Once you become hyper-focused, once you become basically a disciple of light, you are, whether you like it or not, starting to become blinded to that other reality. Light for you is supremely only a revealer. You do not see that it conceals.
I'll see. Yeah, I really am blown away by this this talk today with you, Michael. It's really helping to connect the dots for us, I did want to ask you, in terms of the Druids, you mentioned earlier about their mysteries, and it seems they were very much infiltrated, and that, as you say, the original knowledge was then taken and used for malevolent means. Could you give us a little bit of background on the Druids themselves and their practices for more of a positive means of self-development?
Well, of course, we've already pretty much nailed it down in the sense that they were holistic. The basic essence of Druidism, the word just means truth, or keeper of truth, or keeper of wisdom.
Yeah.
I think one of their primary functions, they had several functions. They thought of themselves as healers because we know that Druids were very much into geomancy and measuring the earth and putting up these standing stones, all those stone circles and megaliths. What was that all about? What did they bother doing that for? That was one of their functions, to heal the earth, because the earth had been through cataclysm.
Yeah.
And they were very much aware that the earth was a living entity, a living being. One might think of it as a goddess. So one of their duties that they assigned to themselves was to heal the earth and do it like a form of acupuncture by putting these stone circles at certain geomantic vortexes. The very act of doing that helped to galvanize the traumatized people.
Yeah.
They used to organize huge teams of people, because you only have to go to Ireland and look at some of that Queen Maid's tomb. You know that it's millions of pieces of tiny little pieces of stone. What on earth? That must have taken thousands of people to do that. Well, that's right, it did. They took hundreds and hundreds of people who were in a state of almost great trauma, and the Druid masters knew that if you get these people to go and pick up all the rocks and debris from all around the land and bring it to a central place that we've designated and place these stones here, it will actually have a positive psychological effect that galvanize the community again.
Yeah.
Right, they were very clever. And secondly, they also doing for the secondary purpose of geomancy. Put those stones there because this is going to help you heal the earth and balance out the vortex. So it was one major thing that they were involved in. Second to that, and part of that, was the understanding, the central metaphysics of them, was that there is no separation between your thinking, your mind, and the natural order of the universe. And therefore, since that is the case, you are not only the caretaker of the universe, you are its child. You are connected to it. And therefore, you're honor bound now to take instruction from nature.
Yeah.
Observe her seasons, observe the cycles, observe the individual plants and animals and their behavior. Later on, you can create metaphors of those. The zodiac is just a metaphor for that.
Okay.
When they say that Aries is a ram and that Taurus is a bull, that's just metaphor to teach ordinary people. Well, you see, you're a farmer. Look at the goat, or you're a fisherman. Look at the behavior of the fish.
Yeah.
People don't understand the esoteric aspect, but if you said this, look at the behavior of the lion. Do you see how proud he is? They could teach astrology just like you're teaching ABCs to a child. It's not that there's actual constellations that look like a lion. That was just a metaphor to teach. And then, of course, the Druids were even smarter than that. They knew they weren't teaching you about the external zodiac. They were teaching you about consciousness. They were teaching you about what I refer to as the inner zodiac in my work. So it was 3 or 4 different levels working at the same time. They were the tutors of the world. They were the archivists of the world. One group of the Druids, known as the Bards, were the memorizers. These people had to memorize the lineage of every nobleman who lived in their country. Every king who ruled, every chieftain, and every nobleman. Those guys were illiterate. They didn't have any kind of written down family trees, or lineage. They called in the Bard, who knew it all by memory. Going back generations, they could tell you who you were related to, the stories of those people. And by the way, when the Atlantis through these Romans came in, and later through Henry II, when they came to England, when they invaded Ireland, did you know that the very first people they targeted was the Bards? These people who gained these people who had this knowledge of the lineage of the indigenous people, the indigenous kings, were all slaughtered in a period less than 100 years.
Gosh.
I actually think it was less than 20 or something like that. It was a mass genocide targeted to get rid of the Bards because they were the ones who held the secret history of Ireland, including the lineage of the kings going back to ancient times.